Mikel Brown Jr. is both ultra skilled and ultra aggressive. I mentioned that for me, he was the biggest question mark in my lottery range for this early 2026 NBA draft cycle. And today I'm joined once again by Abdel from Taco Takes. Abdel, today we're breaking down Mikel Brown Jr. And before we get into anything else, the reason why I think that he's such a big question mark, and honestly, I think that his stock is pretty volatile, is because of how much his body has changed over the last few years, right? Like, I'm looking here
Yeah.
at what I have, and I'm seeing that just a couple years ago, he was listed at 6'1". There was a point where he was listed, if I'm not mistaken, at under 140 pounds. But just earlier this summer, Louisville measured him at 6'5", 180 pounds, 6'7" wingspan. So when you have such a, I would honestly say, an outlier sort of physical development take place, particularly this close to the college season, it's always very interesting to see what this type of player evolves into. With Mikel Brown, he's, a guy who's a very dynamic, and I would even say adventurous guard. He's one of the most dynamic scorers in this draft class. So why do you like him so much?
Yeah. So, like you said, he's like I even start out with my video. He might be the most polarized. He might be the polarizing guard of this draft class, like previous, like Rob Dillingham, Fears, that type of polarizing, right? Last year draft class. But like you said, it's he has a combination of skills that are not only like extremely pop off the screen, but like in terms of creation, shifting the defense, like in the first phase, like when they're in their shell, I think he has a lot of the skills that contribute to that area, and a lot of people could value right coming this upcoming season. You could envision him like if everything goes right, this is a guy who could run my offense, right? As a potential like first, second option, right? Maybe not on championship team yet, we'll see. But that's kind of the sell, like a ultra skilled guard, and then that's backed by the physical development, like you said, because like when I first saw him, I was watching Matas on Sunrise Christian, right? And he was like coming off the bench, and he was tiny, like you said, he might have been like 145 back then, but he was like really skilled. So I was like, okay, let me keep my eye on him. And then a few years later, this guy just like jumped up to like 6'5" now, right? So I think the two things to start with is his elite pull up shooting combined with extremely creative playmaking and backed by physical development. Does he have more physical development in him? Right. So those three are really tantalizing. And if everything comes out right, then you're looking at a potential like higher end creator at the guard position. Right. So that's why I think I would be higher on Mikel more than most people. That's kind of the sell, I would say.
Yeah, I always think back to LaMelo Ball, actually, interestingly enough, when it comes to these sort of really small guards who, have always played against bigger opponents and their games were always kind of funky and unorthodox, but they were always able to get them off, regardless of, being maybe the worst physical player on the floor. So I always think it's remarkable when a guard, especially who's so small, can really do whatever they want and manipulate the defense in the ways that Brown can do. Um, I think you're spot on in everything that you said with his pull-up shooting. His creativity as a playmaker, the way that his body has changed, and I'll add here one more thing, which I think is crucial as well, and I think that he's actually in the conversation for the best prospect in this draft class for this area, and it's ball handling because the way that he chains moves together to get to his spots as a passer,
Yeah.
to utilize and get the most out of screens, to rise into his pull up as well. He's almost always on balance, despite pulling off some pretty complicated moves at a high speed. He's able to use both hands as a passer and as a ball handler. I think that, we'll get into his finishing in a little bit. That's still improvable, but there's
Yeah.
enough, in my opinion, with his process to make you believe in improvements. Um, for you right now, as we look towards this next season at Louisville, what do you think is Michael's most important continued improvement? Because everything that you just touched on, his passing, his body, his pull up, all of that has been improving. But
Yeah.
what do you think that he needs to show that's new that maybe he hasn't been showing as much of lately?
Yeah, I think most importantly, and it's stark and clear when you watch him, like you mentioned earlier, is even though he's developed physically, the strength and core strength specifically, and ability to handle contact is still lagging behind, right? And that affects his game in multiple areas, primarily finishing and handling contact. He can really get like put off his lines on drives a bit, because like you said, his handle is good and he can shake guys, but if guys recover just enough to nudge him, and then he can get pushed off course, right? And then defensively, also, the strength is gonna hinder him, right? But yeah, like that's the biggest number one thing I would say: his strength and ability to handle contact and finishing. Because at the end of the day, elite pull up shooting and playmaking, like there's only so far you can go if you can't finish at the rim, right? Because at the end, people will adjust, and if you're not a threat to get all the way to the rim, then there's schemes and small adjustments teams will make to kind of limit your game, right? So that is number one on my list at Louisville. I'm gonna keep a good eye on. It's not something that develop in 1 year, but maybe we can see indicators, because one of the things I'm thinking about, especially with his physical development, I'm not like a biomechanics person, but like if you have a growth spurt in a short amount of time, like your body and bones grow, but your muscles are still catching up essentially, right? So there could be another leap in terms of explosion and like strength that he could potentially make, but that you can just say that's speculation. But it's something you have to keep an eye on as someone who's growing this rapidly, right? But finishing, strength, number one priorities for me next season.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing here that even though I really believe in Michael's touch, which we'll get into in a little bit here, I also watch out for that growth spurt when it comes to his shooting. I think that we've seen, prospects in the past be affected. When it comes to their shot mechanics, I think Adu Thero from last year's draft, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
is a
Mm-hmm.
good example of someone who's, hands and, wingspan or just arms, I guess, kind of ended up affecting the development of his shot. I don't think that's what
Yeah,
will happen with Michael here, but
it's a good point though. Yeah.
it is always worth keeping in mind. I agree with you. I think that looking for those indicators when it comes to how he gets into the paint and then finishes, most
Mm-hmm.
importantly, is very important. I'm looking at some stats here. You mentioned it in your video in the sample size that you had access to. He finished 47% of his layups.
Yeah.
Then I'm looking here at a 113 game sample throughout his high school career. And I'll stress here that I'm not putting too much weight on this because his body has changed so much that
Yeah.
is pretty contextual, but it is worth keeping in mind that throughout this, 113 game sample, he was shooting 38.6% from the field compared to 35.1% from three. So obviously, if those numbers were to be replicated at the college level, that would be pretty disastrous, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but I really do believe that he has turned a corner with regards to, those sort of hindrances with regards to his physicality. Abdel, it sounds to me like you're pretty high on him as a passer. I like Michael as a passer, but I don't love him as a passer. I think that his reads are generally pretty good, but sometimes I worry that his playmaking or his passing to scoring balance rather is a little bit lopsided in favor of scoring. Um, Sometimes I worry that his reads, even though they are creative, they can be a little bit predetermined, meaning that he might have already decided to score or that he wants to score rather than kind of letting the defense show him whatever it is, and then making a decision from there. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, just sell me on his passing. Do you think that he's going to be someone who is, a true point guard, or
Hmm.
are you like me and maybe you see him as a little bit more of those modern kind of like, I don't even want to say combo guards because I don't think that's entirely accurate, but kind of like a 1.5 kind of guard.
Yeah. So like it's interesting because I don't think I necessarily disagree because in the video and most of what I say about his passing is creative, right? Like like even when I was writing the script, I didn't want to say like elite or high level because I think what you said is spot on. He makes the flashy, nice passes, and he has a lot of deliveries right in his bag. The thing is, though, some of the art of playmaking is this is what Halliburton is elite at. He'll make the pass that just looks simple, but is healthy for the offense, essentially, right? So Mikel is more of a like, oh, I'm gonna try to get my own shot. Oh, they're like sending two at me. Let me just whip this pass over, right? Or like I got to the rim, whatever. Oh, there's two guys on me. Like he can make the pass, identify like when people are sending help at him, but the question is like the true floor generals playmaking. It's more about thinking about the offense as a whole, pushing the pace. Okay, I'm going to make this pass so he can make that next pass so the whole offense can eat. Rather, some other playmakers are more, you see it with like the more heliocentric scorers. Like, I'm going to put the most pressure on the defense at this point, right? The moment the defense shifts over, then I'm going to hit someone up and then there'll be an open shot. But it's more of a static way of playing. Like the other type of guys like Halliburton, even I'll put Kyle Lowry in this field because I'm a Raptor fan, obviously. But like just pushing the pace, making the next pass, like that's like what I envision a real point guard playmaker. So I have questions if he's that realm, right? So if we gun to my head, I would say probably he leans more to the 1.5 side with flashes of like wow, flashy passing, but how effective is it for the offense on a possession by possession basis, right? So that's kind of my thoughts on his playmaking.
Quick question here before we get into his NBA kind of outcome. What are you looking to see from him defensively this upcoming season? Because to be honest, I don't really think that his draft stock or really his NBA future is predicated on defense in any type of
Yeah.
massive way. Obviously, you can't be a complete mess on defense, but with some prospects, particularly if you're like a high level guard prospect like Michael seems, I'm more or less looking, I don't want to say the bare minimum, but as
Yeah.
long as you compete, as long as you're, aware off the ball and you're not someone who's falling asleep every couple of plays, as long as
Yeah.
he's kind of offsetting whatever physical advantages or maybe even, like effort questions there could be on defense, as long as he's doing enough on offense, I think I'm comfortable with his
Hmm.
defense. Is that sort of your idea as well, or like, do you really want to see some sort of improvement, or maybe using the size to, I guess it would be nice if obviously his stock numbers grew a little bit, particularly his steal numbers, but what are you looking to see from him on that end of the floor?
Yeah. Like I'm not like it's all about expectations. Right? I don't expect a player like this, prospect like this, to show me anything like crazy on defense that'll like significantly change my opinion. It's more focused on how his offensive skills will translate to the next level, right? That's kind of the debate about him as a prospect. Defense is more about just don't be a disaster, right? And I think he has enough there. Like you said, his size already helps him, right? Because immediately when you're like, let's say 6'4", 6'5" versus 6'1", 6'2", like even if 6'1", 6'2" guy may be stronger, let's say, it's just more about okay, the offense is gonna target a 6'1", 6'2" guy more often, even if it's like let's say they're both same level as defenders, right? It's just a perception as well. But I also think I think Mikel, his biggest thing on defense is I don't even think he's that bad moving his feet. I think he's decently aggressive with like swiping down and trying to strip the ball from guys. So I think he puts up resistance. It's just that at the next level and in the NBA, guys when they put a shoulder through him, he's just gone, right? So or like guys will like they'll get a switch on him, post him up, clear out, that type of thing. That's the concern you would have, because then you have more stress in your defense. But I think all he has to do for me is show he can hold his ground a bit better and continue to improve and flash in more defensive playmaking numbers, like you said. If he can get more steals and everything, then it'll kind of buoy his defensive floor, right? But it's not. It's something I'm gonna monitor, but it's not like the finishing is more like, oh, I have to focus on this, versus the defense is like, if he gets better at this, that'll be nice. If he's a disaster, then I'll account it. But if he's kind of in the middle, it's not gonna drastically change my opinion on him, right?
We're both still making our ways through our, respective big boards here for the preseason, but I think for me, it's pretty much a lock that he's going to be in my top 10, probably like top 7,
Yeah,
top
same.
8 kind of range. Towards the NBA now, the way that I'm looking at his season, or, sort of his, I guess, short to midterm outlook here, I'm thinking of him almost in like a Darius Garland type of light with regards to how many threes he can put up, with regards to the physical limitations as well. But of course, Garland is what, 6'1", probably on a generous day, 6'1". Mikel is more like 6'5" now. So if you have
Yeah.
that, bigger Darius Garland sort of, archetype or, broader range type of player for me, that's someone who I feel very comfortable drafting that high up. Is there anyone that he reminds you of? Is there anyone who you're thinking about when it comes to potential similarities, when it comes to, Brown's NBA profile now?
Yeah, I think the Garland one is a good comparison, because obviously on the higher end, right? If you envision his playmaking to be elite, right? People say, oh, Trey Young, right? Where you combine the pull-up threat and the playmaking, but that's absolute like 95th plus percentile, right? But Garland, one thing is interesting is I think this will hurt him a bit, but you can also kind of compare him to, not exactly, but more of the combo guards that have fallen out of favor in the league these days. So like an Anthony Simons, Tyler Hero, Jordan Poole, let's say, right? Or even guys like last year, Rob Dillingham, right? So these guys who are like dynamic off the dribble, can pull up, different degrees of passing. I think Mikel, his argument is I'm better passer than those guys, right? So it puts me out of that bracket and more into Darius Garland. But I think that's going to work as a double-edged sword. So I think he'll get compared to those group of players, and then people will think that's not a valuable archetype anymore and drop him on the boards, right? But if you believe in the playmaking and you think, oh, he's going to differentiate himself from those guys, then I would say, closer to Darius Garland, I would draft him like top 7, top 6 for sure. But that's kind of, I guess I gave more the negative comp to compensate. But those, I think that you'll see that throughout the season, right? Combo guard comps.
I think it's important to look at the downside as well. Jordan Poole was the name that I had as well. It's more of like a median end kind of outcome.
Yeah.
Someone who I had on the lower side, and I actually quite liked this guy when he was coming out of college, but he just hasn't had much luck in the NBA. That's Trey Mann. I think that would sort of be
Yes,
kind of
that's
like
a
a
good one.
downside. So it will be interesting to see how Mikel develops over the next, I would say, 4-ish seasons would probably be like his
Yeah.
range right now in the NBA in order to really thrive. But for now, yeah, I think, top 7, top 8, top 10 makes a lot of sense. One last question here before I let you go. Is he the best point guard for you in this draft class? And I'll let you answer that however way you want to, because, if some people want to consider Darren Peterson or even
Yeah, that's the
AJ
question. Yeah.
Debanza as well, like a point
Yeah.
guard type, if you think like, hey, they're going to be playing the one most of the time, that's fine as well. But yeah, do you think Michael is the best point guard?
Yeah, I think I would consider Peterson more as like a 1.52, like you mentioned earlier, because even though he's like extremely special, the playmaking is not natural. He has like more of like a impressive playmaking for a 2 guard than a natural 1 playmaking, right? So I would say I wouldn't consider him a 1, right? So considering Mikel 1, the only other guy that I'll do a video on in the next few weeks is Darius Acuff, to compare him to, I think, in that range. My first impressions is, because I did a video on Mikel, so it's not fair, but I would prefer Mikel because of his size. But I'll see what I feel there. But currently, yes, because I don't consider Darren Peterson a pure 1, right? But either way, like he has a good chance of being second guard behind Darren Peterson. You know, I guess is another way to put it, but second best guard. So that's kind of what I think.
Abdel, thank you once again for coming on to the Above and Beyond conversations, breaking down Mikel Brown Jr. I'm sure that this is a guy who we're going to get back into pretty often throughout this draft cycle, playing on a loaded Louisville team, actually. So there's going to be a bunch of NBA eyes on him regardless throughout this cycle. Yep. Again, guys, make sure to check out the description. You can check out Taco Takes on there. Make sure to check out Abdel's videos. Subscribe to his channel. He's putting out some great content. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching.